exciting day today as we begin the 48th and final chapter of the book of Yechezkel. We can pat ourselves on the back for yet another book that we will complete today in this journey through the Tanakh, 929 chapters. Ve'ele shmot hashvatim miktzei tzafona el yad derech chetlon lavo chamat chatzer einon gvul damesek tzafona el yad chamat vayulo pat kadim hayam dan echad. We've concluded the last chapter. Yechezkel was describing the borders of Israel and how where the lines, where the boundaries, where the borders were, and he hasn't yet gotten into, but he'll get into where the different tribes then will get lands. And he says, so it begins this chapter. These are the names of the tribes along the northern end, right, which is up the border with Hamad and Damascus. So this is up the north. Ve'ele gvul Dan, mifat kadim ad pat yam asher echad. So that's the territory of Dan. And next to it, closer to the western border, again in the north, is the tribe of Asher. Now we know Dan originally did not get land in the north of Israel, but back in the book of Shoftim, they went north and they destroyed a town with innocent people because they had trouble defeating the people in their area. And so they moved north, and here they remain in the north. Asher, like many of the other ones, we'll see it's not exactly where they were given land. V'al gvul Asher mifat kadima v'al pat yama naftali echad. Next to the territory of Asher, from the eastern border to the western border, is Naphtali. V'al gvul Naftali pat kedma pat yama Menashe echad. Next to the territory of Naphtali, from the eastern border to the western border, is Menashe. V'al gvul Menashe mifat kedma ad pat yama Ephraim echad. And next to the territory of Menashe, as part of Menashe, was next to the territory of Ephraim back when Yoshua gave it out. Menashe is again with Ephraim. V'agvul Ephraim vat kadim vat pat yama Reuven echad. So Reuven underneath Ephraim. Of course, Reuven got land on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. The territories and the borders that Yechezkel has in our chapter don't go to the eastern bank of the Jordan River. It doesn't include parts of Jordan today. So Reuven is placed inside in between the river to the sea, as the famous expression these days go. V'agvul Reuven mifat kadim ad pat yama Yehuda achad. Next to the territory of Reuven is the territory of Yehuda. V'agvul Yehuda mifat kadim ad pat yama tiana truma asher tarimu chamishaya v'esrim elef rochav v'orech ke'echad hachalakim mifat kadim ad pat yama v'ayam mikdash b'tocho. So next to Yehuda is territory that we talked about in previous chapters. It's 25,000 cubits in breadth and in length, and this is the territory that was given to Kohanim, Leviim. This was the territory in which, as the temple, as it says here, the temple, the sanctuary would be. V'hatruma asher tarimu l'Adonai orech chamisha v'esrim elef v'rochav aseret alafim. The reserve set aside for God, 25,000 cubits long and 10,000 wide. Eile tiat trumat hakodesh lakohanim tzafona chamisha v'esrim elef v'yam rochav aseret alafim v'kadim rochav aseret alafim v'negba orech chamisha v'esrim elef v'yam mikdash Adonai b'tocho. And this is the way it shall be apportioned. So they're going to, of the 25,000 cubits on the north, and 10,000 in the west, and 10,000 east, and 25,000 on the south. Right, that's the Kohanim are going to be around the Mikdash. We've already been told, and it's being told to us now in this verse, in verse 11, Pasuk Yud Aleph, Lakonim hamikudash mibnei tzadok asher shamru mishmarti asher lo ta'u b'nei Yisrael kasher ta'u halviim. We said in the last number of chapters ago, it's only the Bnei Tzadok, the Kohen, who becomes the Kohen Gadol during the life of, after the life of David, during his time period. It had been from another family, from the family of Evyatar, but Tzadok and his descendants are the righteous priests. You can debate whether or not they remain the righteous priests, as we of course know towards the end of the Second Temple period, where we have the Pharisees, what we'll call the Torah observant, written Torah and oral Torah Jews, as opposed to the Sadducees. And that, of course, is coming from the word tzadok. But it's limited, as we talked many times before, to them because they did not go astray. Pasuk Yud Bet, Vaytalahem truma mitrumat haaretz kodesh kadoshim el gvul halavim, will be special reserve for them, for the land adjoining the territory of the Levites. And along the territory of the priests, the Levites will have their area 25,000 long by 10,000 wide. That will be there. So again, this is more reminiscent to what we have in the Midbar, when Bnei Yisrael encamped around the Mishkan on all four sides, with the camps of the Levim and the Kohanim being in the middle, and the Mikdash, the Mishkan, then the tabernacle, now the Mikdash, in its center. Pasuk Yud Dalet, V'lo yimcharu mimenu v'lo yamer v'lo ya'avir reshit haaretz ki kadosh l'Adonai. None of it, the choicest land, may be sold, exchanged, or transferred. It is sacred to God, right? That this territory in the middle that belongs to the Kohanim, the Leviim, it can't be given to anybody else. The remaining 5,000 by 25,000 will be for common use, Reshut Harabim, served for dwellings of pasture, and the city will be in the middle of it. Okay. Let us continue. These are the Okay, now he goes on with more measurements: 4,500 cubits on the south, to the east, 4,500 on the west. Right, all of these different. The pasture will extend 250 cubits to the north, and to the south, and to the east, and to the west. And the remaining land, and the remaining 10,000 cubits to the east and 10,000 to the west will be a reserve where produce will go to the people, the workers in the city. The workers of the city from all the tribes of Israel will come and cultivate, and thus it will be for them and for the other workers. We're in Pasuk Chaf, verse 20. The entire reserve, 25,000 square cubits, will be set aside as a sacred reserve in addition to the city. Now we get to the next person, Han La Nasi. Right? We talked about in the past how he's called the Nasi. He's not called the Melech. It's a little bit of a lower on the absolute rulership. So there's also territory for the prince or for the king. So right, and so there is other space there that belongs to the Kohen, belongs to the prince or the king. It's also 25. It's from the borders, the eastern borders to the western borders, and with the temple sanctuary again in it, in the middle of it. The property of the Levites and the city property will be in the middle of the area of the prince. And this is all in between the territory of Yehuda and Binyamin. And now we keep going south from the eastern border to the western border is the territory of Binyamin. And south of Binyamin is Shimon. In the original giving by Yehoshua, Shimon was south of Yehuda, was the most southern tribe. But here, Al Gvul Shimon, Mipat Kadima, Pat Yama, Yisachar Echad. Here, Yisachar is to the south from the eastern border to the western border. And finally, if this is well, maybe not finally, my apologies. Gvul Yisachar Pat Kadimat Pat Yama Zvulun. So Zvulun is south of them. Gvul Zvulun Pat Kadimat Pat Yama Gad Echad. Then we get the territory of Gad. South of them, Gvul Gad El Pat Negev Teimana. Gvul Mitamar Meim Rivat Kadesh Nachala Ad Hayam Ha'Gadol. The other border of God will be the southern boundary, the boundary that runs from Tamar to the waters of Merivat Kadesh, all the way to the Wadi of Egypt and to the Mediterranean. This is the land that we will allot as a nachala, as a heritage, as an inheritance to the tribes of Israel. And these are their portions, says God. Now, it's impossible not to contrast this with the description that's given in the book of Yoshua. In the book of Yoshua, Yoshua doesn't just declare where it's supposed to be. I'm not saying that this was a declaration made by Yechezkel alone. This is coming from God. But there was this goral, there was this lottery as to where the different tribes were given territory. That's not the way it's done here. Here, God is just demanding it. We don't know exactly why. But again, to continue with at least something from yesterday, which we said, it's noteworthy that this is the Aseret HaShvatim, that it's all 12 tribes. He talks about a complete reunification of Bnei Yisrael. It's not just the people of Yehuda. It's not just the people who were exiled to Bavel with him in the year 597 with Yephoniah. This is all of Bnei Yisrael coming back. This is God in his temple, and therefore all of Bnei Yisrael are around him. And if we think back, it makes sense to compare it, as I said earlier, with the desert when God was so close to Bnei Yisrael after the sin of the golden calf. God says to Moshe, I'll send your angel in front of you to guide you. I'll send my angel. And Moshe comes out and tells Bnei Yisrael, and they cry. They don't want the angel. They want God. God is amongst them. God is next to them. And God said, at that time, they said he was going to send the angel. Said, it's not so good for me to be next to you because problems happen and worries happen. And when I'm close to you, bad things happen. God is too dynamic and can be too demanding. And so here as well, but here it's more safeguarded. Sort of that iron wall, like we said. None of the uncircumcised people can come into the temple. Much more restrictions on where the Israelites can go and where the Levites can go and who can serve as Kohanim, only some of the Kohanim. So God says this is how it's going to be, and this will be forever, is what was said a number of chapters ago. But it has to be with these sort of boundaries to ensure that that you don't sin again. Continuing in verse 30. And these are the exits from the city on the north side, measuring 4,500 cubits. The gates to the city, the three gates on the north, are named for the tribes of Israel: the Reuven gate, the Yehuda gate, and the Levi gate. On the eastern side, there are also three gates: the Yosef gate, the Binyamin gate, and the Dan gate. On the southern side, also the three gates: the Shimon gate, the Issachar gate, and the Zvulun gate. And finally, Shar Gad Echad, Shar Asher Echad, Shar Naphtali Echad. On the western side, there are three gates: the Gad gate, the Asher gate, and the Naphtali gate. And this is all Saviv Shmona Asar Aleph, the Shem Ha'ir Miyom Adonai Shama. This is the circumference. Remember math? 8 will be 18,000 cubits, and the name of the city from that day will be Hashem Shama. It's no longer Yerushalayim. It's no longer Ir David. The city is called God is there. And the book ends with that. Not surprisingly, as we've described in a number of chapters recently, it begins with Yechezkel watching God's presence, the Merkava, God's kavod, God's glory, the manifestation of God, as close as it is in this earth, leaving Yerushalayim with his chariots, going east. And finally, back in chapter 43, we saw in this vision with Yechezkel's tour guide, this human or angelic tour guide in these visions, that God's Merkava has returned. And so the book, which starts with predictions about the future horrific destruction of Jerusalem and God leaving Jerusalem, God is now coming back, but it's no longer called Yerushalayim. It's almost like it's a different city. We're erasing the memory of it and we're starting over. And what's significant about this city is less that David picked this as his capital, is less that it's a place that Bnei Yisrael gather. It will be that, but it's the idea that God is once again with us. And in a sense, this book has similarities back to the book of Shemot, which begins with Bnei Yisrael in exile and torture and genocide and enslavement. And while the book doesn't necessarily start with that, the early chapters of the book are about destruction, about killing of Bnei Yisrael, the destruction of their city. They're going into exile and slavery. And much like in that book, as the Ramban calls it, the Sefer Galut v'Geula, the book of exile and redemption not being going all the way back to Israel, but rather building the Mishkan and therefore being together with God. Galut is a manifestation, is distance from God, and Geula, a manifestation not about a specific place, but closeness to God. That's what is happening in this book as well. We are ending with God there, and thus it is a great redemption, one that, as we've spoken about for many, is predictive of the future redemption May it come speedily in our days. We say chazak, chazak, v'nitchazek. This book should strengthen us, and we should, I'll also say, like we say for the Gemara, Hadran alach sefer Yechezkel. We'll say, we will return to you. To you, Hadar will return, or Hadar means beauty. Either way, we will return to you and study you again and look hopefully deeper into your visions and your ideas, Yechezkel, in the future.